My name is Claire Anderson, and for the past 3 years, I have been married to Mark, a kind-hearted man who came into my life when I least expected it. Mark had a son from his first marriage, a 13-year-old boy named Ryan. From the beginning, I knew that loving Mark also meant learning to love and accept Ryan as part of my life. Blended families are never easy. I had read enough articles and heard enough stories from friends to know that the journey comes with its own unique challenges. Ryan was polite to me, but there was always a distance between us. He never called me mom, and I never forced him to. He stuck to calling me Claire, which I understood. Deep down, though, I hoped that one day he would see me as more than just his dad's wife. Mark often reassured me that Ryan just needed time. His mother, Emily, had moved to another state after the divorce, and although she still called occasionally, Ryan rarely mentioned her. He lived with us most of the time, and I could tell he carried emotions he didn't know how to express. I wanted to help him, but I didn't know how to break through his walls. One Saturday afternoon, everything changed. Mark had left for a quick work trip, and it was just Ryan and me in the house. I was cleaning up the living room when I noticed Ryan's door was half open upstairs. Usually he kept it shut tight, like a shield against the world. Something about the way it stood ajar made me pause. I heard muffled sounds, frustrated groans, papers crumpling, and the distinct sound of someone fighting back tears. I hesitated for a moment. Should I knock? Should I respect his space? But something in my heart nudged me forward. I lightly tapped on the door and pushed it open. What I saw made my chest tighten. Ryan was sitting at his desk, his head buried in his hands. His math book was open in front of him, filled with messy eraser marks and half-scribbled answers. Crumpled papers littered the floor around him. His face was red, and his eyes brimmed with tears he was desperately trying to hide. "Ryan," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He quickly straightened, swiping at his eyes. "I'm fine," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Just leave me alone." But I couldn't leave. Not this time. I walked in slowly, sitting on the edge of his bed across from the desk. "It doesn't look like you're fine," I said gently. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." He clenched his fists. "It's just stupid math. I can't get it. I've tried 100 times, and it just doesn't make sense." For a moment, I saw the boy behind the frustration. A kid who didn't want to fail, who was scared of disappointing himself and his dad. "Ryan," I said, leaning forward, "you don't have to go through this alone. Let me help." He shot me a doubtful look. You don't even know what's going on with me." "You're not." He stopped himself, but I knew what he almost said. "You're not my mom." The word stung, but I pushed past the ache. "You're right," I admitted softly. "I'm not your mom, but I care about you, Ryan. More than you probably realize. And I want to be here for you if you'll let me." Silence filled the room. His walls were still up, but a tiny crack had formed. Finally, with a sigh, he slid the math book toward me. "Fine, but I bet you can't even solve it either." I smiled. Challenge accepted. We spent the next hour working through the problems together. At first he was resistant, rolling his eyes and crossing his arms. But slowly, as I broke down each step, his frown began to fade. When he finally solved a problem on his own, his eyes lit up with pride. "See," I said, grinning. "You've got this. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for." He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his expression. Trust. "Thanks, Claire," he whispered. That night, something shifted between us. The following weeks were different. Ryan began leaving his door open more often. Sometimes he'd wander into the kitchen while I cooked and tell me about his day. Other times, he'd ask for help with homework without hesitation. It wasn't just about math anymore. It was about him finally realizing he didn't have to go through life struggles alone. When Mark returned from his trip, he noticed the change immediately. "What happened while I was gone?" he asked one evening, watching as Ryan and I laughed over a silly inside joke at the dinner table. I smiled, glancing at Ryan, who was grinning back at me. We just figured out that sometimes the hardest problems aren't about math. They're about letting someone else in. Mark reached across the table and squeezed my hand, his eyes full of gratitude. From that day forward, Ryan and I grew closer. He still called me Claire, but the way he said it carried warmth now. And sometimes, when he'd slip and call me mom by accident, I pretended not to notice the happy tears that welled in my eyes. Walking in on Ryan that afternoon had changed everything. It showed me that love isn't always about being perfect or having a title. It's about showing up in the moments that matter most. And for Ryan, for Mark, and for me, that moment had been the beginning of a family finally coming together.